I always told my students that I noticed everything. And the night I stopped believing that was Monday, February 11th, 2019, at 11:46 p.m. when I was standing alone in my kitchen in apartment 3B of the Ashford Arms complex on Millstone Road in Brookside, Pennsylvania, rereading a text message from an unknown number that simply said, "You forgot to lock the back classroom window today." Because I hadn't told anyone I'd stayed late to grade essays, I hadn't told anyone I'd opened that window to let the smell of disinfectant clear out. I distinctly remember locking it before I left at 4:09 p.m., a time I remember clearly because I always leave at 4:10, and that day I'd beaten it by a minute, which made the message feel less like a threat and more like a correction. And that was the part that unsettled me most, because whoever sent it wasn't trying to scare me yet. They were letting me know they were paying attention. And when I checked the number, there was no name, no voicemail, no history, just silence. And over the next 2 days, I told myself it had to be a prank. Maybe a student, maybe someone overheard me talking in the hallway, maybe coincidence stacked on coincidence. Except that the details kept getting more precise. Like on Wednesday, February 13th, when I found a folded index card inside my locked desk drawer that read, "You prefer to arrive before sunrise because the parking lot is empty." Which was true and not something I'd ever said out loud, or on Friday, February 15th, when I took a different route from home because I had a headache and didn't want to sit in traffic. Only to find another message waiting when I pulled into my space at 6:02 p.m. that said, "Detours don't help." And from that point on, I stopped pretending it was harmless, because it became clear that someone wasn't just watching me at school, they were following me beyond it, learning my patterns, testing how I reacted when they nudged those patterns out of place. And I began to feel it everywhere. Like the awareness you get when you realize you've been speaking too loudly in a quiet room, that sudden sense of exposure, and I started making changes. Not dramatic ones at first, just small adjustments. Checking my mirrors more often, varying my schedule, keeping the classroom door closed even during free periods. But the responses came faster when I did. Like the time I stayed in the teacher's lounge instead of my room during lunch on February 21st and found a note taped to my car mirror afterwards that read, "You don't like being watched in public." Or when I left the building with a colleague on March 1st and received a message that night saying, "You relax when someone walks with you." Which meant whoever this was didn't just see where I went, they saw how I felt about it. And by early March, the tone shifted from observation to implication. Because the note stopped describing what I did and started describing what could happen. Like the one I found tucked into my lesson planner on March 6th. It said, "You lock your classroom twice, but you never check the stairwell door." Or the one on March 11th that read, "Your apartment hallway camera has a dead angle between 10:58 and 11:12, which sent me into a panic spiral at 2 a.m. as I sat on my couch staring at the door, lights off, phone in my hand, realizing that someone had taken the time to learn the building I lived in as well as the one I taught in. I tried to do the responsible thing. I really did. I reported it to the administration first, who listened politely and suggested stress leave. Then to the police on March 14th at the Brookside precinct, where an officer took notes and asked if I had enemies. I remember how small and foolish I felt saying, "Not that I know of," because that was the truth. I had no idea who this could be or why. And when nothing came of it, the behavior escalated. Because on March 19th, I found my classroom rearranged when I arrived at 6:41 a.m. Desks shifted by inches, seating charts reversed, my nameplate turned upside down, nothing broken, nothing missing, just altered. And written on the whiteboard in neat handwriting was, "I can come and go." I stood there longer than I should have. listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights, feeling like the room itself had become unsafe. And after that, the messages became more frequent, daily, sometimes hourly, always precise, always calm. Like March 22nd, when my phone buzzed during fourth period with, "Your heart rate increases when the bell rings early." Or on March 25th, when I skipped dinner and received, "You forget to eat when you're scared." And that was when I realized this person wasn't just watching my movements, they were watching my reactions, my stress, my fear, and that realization made everything feel more dangerous, because it meant they were learning how far they could push me without breaking cover. Then came the first moment that felt genuinely life-threatening. Not implied or distant, but immediate, which happened on April 2nd at 7:18 a.m., when I unlocked my classroom and stepped inside and heard the door close behind me. Not loudly, not abruptly, just enough to be unmistakable. And when I turned, there was no one there, but the lock was engaged from the inside, and my phone buzzed in my pocket with a message that said, "You always arrive alone." I don't know how long I stood there before unlocking the door again, hands shaking so badly I dropped my keys, because nothing physically happened in that room. But the point had been made. They could trap me if they wanted to, and the only reason they hadn't was because they weren't finished yet. After that, I stopped staying late altogether, started carrying my keys between my fingers when I walked, started sleeping with the lights on. But the more defensive I became, the more aggressive the messages got, shifting from calm observations to instructions like, "Don't leave early tomorrow," or "You should stop taking Millstone Road." And when I ignored those, consequences followed. Not violent ones at first, just warnings like the time I left early anyway on April 9th and found my car door open when I returned. Interior lights on, nothing missing. Glove compartment neatly closed, as if to say they'd been inside and chosen not to take anything. Or on April 14th, when I took Millstone Road out of spite and nearly got sideswiped by a truck that ran a light. I'll never know if that was coincidence or not, but I do know that my phone vibrated immediately afterwards with, "That was avoidable." After that, I stopped believing in coincidence entirely, because the pattern was too consistent, too tailored. By late April, the messages became explicitly threatening, though never directly, never saying, "I will hurt you," just outlining possibilities in a detached way like, "You live alone," or "There's no camera behind the gym after dark," or "No one would hear you in the stairwell." And I began to understand that this person wasn't acting out of impulse or anger. They were studying me the way I studied lesson plans, methodically, patiently, waiting for the right conditions. The breaking point came on May 3rd, 2019 at 8:03 p.m. I was walking from my car to my apartment and realized someone was behind me. Not close enough to hear, not far enough to ignore, matching my pace perfectly. When I sped up, they sped up. When I stopped, they stopped. And my phone buzzed with a message that said, "Don't run." I felt something in my chest give way, because for the first time this wasn't theoretical. It wasn't a note or a message. It was proximity. I turned and saw a silhouette at the end of the lot. Just a shape. No distinguishing features, and they didn't chase me when I bolted for the door. They didn't need to. Because by the time I got inside and locked it, shaking, there was already a message waiting that said, "You made it because I allowed it." After that, I knew I couldn't stay. I requested immediate leave, packed only essentials, stayed with a friend for 2 nights before realizing they knew that address too, because on May 6th, I found a note on her porch that read, "Temporary solutions." And that was when I disappeared. Not dramatically, not officially. I resigned quietly, left the state, cut contact, changed numbers, moved into a short-term rental 3 hours away under a month-to-month lease, and for a while, it worked. For almost 3 months, there was nothing. No messages, no notes, no signs. I started to believe that maybe distance had been enough, that whoever it was had lost interest. That was until August 19th, 2019, the first day of the new school year back in Brookside, when my old phone, the one I'd kept powered off in a drawer, turned on by itself at 6:12 a.m. and received a single message that read, "Observation complete." What terrifies me now isn't just that someone watched me until my life collapsed. It's that they never rushed, never panicked, never revealed themselves fully. They controlled the pace from the beginning. They decided when to frighten me and when to let me breathe. And then if they wanted to escalate from watching to something worse, there'd be nothing impulsive about it, nothing emotional. Just a continuation of the same careful attention. I still don't know if they stopped because they were finished, or because they wanted me to know that they could start again whenever they chose.